Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first of the Life of a Book panel sessions. I'm Kirstine Bell. For those listening, I am a white woman in her 40s with long, straight, dark hair and glasses, and I am sitting in the virtual background of the stone-walled living room in the main house at Moniac Moor. I look after projects at Moniac Moor, Scotland's Creative Writing Centre, and it has been our great pleasure to bring to life the idea for these sessions, which was first developed by Creative Scotland and is funded through Creative Scotland's National Lottery and is also being supported by Hawthornden Foundation and Society of Authors. So, as you know, the whole point of these sessions is to demystify those areas of the journey of creating a book, from writing it through querying and working with agents and publishers to what happens after the book has been published and how we can all help co-create a community that supports writers at every stage. We are kicking off this week with a frankly quite fabulous panel discussing the beginning of your book's journey with Kevin MacNeil, Nadine Aisha Jassat and Louise Welsh, and chaired by Alice Tarbuck. Before I hand over to Alice, please bear with me for a wee bit of online housekeeping. So to view captions, you can select the closed caption CC icon along the very bottom of the Zoom screen and select show captions, or you can select hide captions to switch it off. Alternatively, if you click the wee dots or arrow beside the CC icon, you can choose to view transcript and it will show the transcript in a separate window. These events are being recorded. As this is a webinar, the audience is not visible to the panelists and are not being recorded. The recordings will be available via Moniac's website a few weeks after the events. And I have lost my place, sorry. Yes, they'll be available as a resource for everyone to come back to. And there will be DSL interpretation added to the recordings. Also, any books, website, podcasts and the like that are referenced during the discussion will be compiled and added to the transcript of the event and will be available with the recording. We'll notify everyone who attended when the recordings are available. And if you are now watching the recording, thank you for your patience while I outlined all this to our live audience. My colleague Angela is here as tech support. So if you have any technical difficulties during the event, you can contact her either using the chat function or the email or phone number that Ange will drop into the chat now. If for any reason there are any connection issues with the internet, then please do just try and rejoin on the same link. We may not be able to see you all, but we would still love to hear from you. Along the bottom of your screens, you'll see the Q&A function and a chat function. The Q&A will open halfway through the discussion for any additional questions that we might have time for. The panel will do their best to pick as many as they can. And for any general comments, chat, then we welcome the use of the chat function. And as I say, Angela will be in there too. So that is quite enough from me. I am delighted now to introduce you to our chair, Alice Tarbuck, who, as well as being Literature Officer at Creative Scotland, is an award-winning poet and writer. Her debut non-fiction book, A Spell in the Wild, A Year and 6 Centuries of Magic, is published by Hodder and Stoughton. And with Claire Askew, she's the co-editor of Modern Craft, published by Watkins. She's a previous winner of the Scottish Book Trust's New Writers Award for Poetry and recipient of their award for programming, and teaches or has taught creative writing at universities of Dundee and York, and is a lead reader for Open Book and is currently writer in residence at the University of York. So thank you all again for joining us, and welcome, Alice.
Thank you so much, and thank you for that lovely introduction, Kirstine. It's so nice to be here with my Creative Scotland hat on, chairing this panel. And I'm just going to give you a brief visual description of me. So my name is Alice Tarbuck. My pronouns are they stroke she. I am a woman in my mid-30s. I have red hair and I'm wearing a red headband and a red scarf, and my background is blurred because I'm sorting through loads of books and they're all over the room. So I am going to just give you a really quick outline of what this panel is going to look like. So I'm going to introduce our brilliant speakers briefly. We're going to kick off with a question, and they're going to kind of tell you a little bit more about themselves as they answer that first question. We're going to take about 40 minutes to get through as many topics and questions as we can, which include some questions pre-submitted by all of you, our brilliant audience, and then we will take 20 minutes at the end for any questions. And as Christine said, the Q&A chat is where we'll be, the Q&A, sorry, not the chat, is where we will be gathering those questions from, just to keep them all organised, because there's nearly 300 of you. So please look forward to that opening if you have any questions, and we will do our very best to answer them. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start by introducing our brilliant speakers. So first off, we have Nadine Aisha Jassat, who is the author of Let Me Tell You This, and the verse novel, The Stories Grandma Forgot and How I Found Them. And her new verse novel, The Hidden Story of Esti Noor, was released last Thursday, which is amazing. I would encourage you all to go out and find it from a good bookshop. Nadine has taught and performed internationally and across media, including BBC Scotland's The Big Scottish Book Club and Authors Live. Next, we have Kevin MacNeil, who is a leading Scottish novelist, poet, playwright and screenwriter who was born and raised in the Outer Hebrides. His most recent novel, The Brilliant and Forever, was published to huge critical acclaim and was shortlisted for the Saltire Fiction Fiction of the Year award. And finally, we have Louise Welsh, who is the author of 10 novels, including The Cutting Room, Plague Times trilogy, and The Dogs. And additionally, Louise has a 10-year practice in opera with composer Stuart McCrae. Then their most recent opera, which I saw and was brilliant, Anthropocene, was originally commissioned by Scottish Opera and has enjoyed productions in the UK, Germany, and Salzburg. So thank you so much, all of you, for being here. We're going to start off with a question that actually came in pre-submitted from the audience, just to get you kind of situated. This panel is all about how you actually sit down and write a book. So I thought it would be helpful to start with the question, how do you get your ideas out of your head and onto the page when you have an idea to write something? And I'm going to kick off. I'm going to go to Nadine first, and then Kevin, and then Louise.
Thanks, Alice. And just to start with a visual description of myself as well. So I'm a mixed ethnicity woman in my 30s. I'm wearing headphones and glasses, and I've got long dark hair, and behind me is a slightly messy bookshelf and some beadwork protea flowers. And so the question, how do I get my ideas out of my head and onto the page? And I think one of the biggest things that writers don't often talk about, but that's actually so key, is about, yes, it's wonderful when you stick with the idea in the moment and you follow it, but it's also about the regular showing up with that idea and building the work, the book into practice and giving it the dedication, even when you're not in a poetic moment of dramatic inspiration. And so for me, what that looks like is my ideas. I could do work on plotting, do work on paper, but what's most productive for me is usually I show up at my desk between 6 and 8 a.m. every morning and write for 2 hours when I'm working for a book. And it's that daily practice that I find my most useful tool.
That is fantastic. And I think 6 a.m. has already struck a degree of fear into all of us, Nadine. So thank you for that. Next, we're going to come to Kevin.
It's always 6 a.m. somewhere. Yes, thank you. I'm Kevin. In terms of a visual description, I've got short hair. I'm wearing glasses and contact lenses because I have keratoconus, and a brown shirt, and nothing very visually interesting. My main point of visual interest, my rescue greyhound, is not even here with me, so we can all imagine her. In terms of how I sort of embrace ideas and run with them creatively, it very, very much depends on what the idea is. If the idea is something like an authentic moment that manifests in nature, for example, and it wants to be naturally a haiku, I set it down without thinking, because thought and overthinking destroys good haiku. If it's a poem, again, I feel I've got a different kind of poem. I'll put all of the finesse and technique in that I can. If it's a short story or a novel or a stage play or a screenplay, then increasingly you've got to be much more open to external input. Generally, the more people and the more money involved in a project, the more you have to be somewhat flexible. And so your relationship to the idea and your relationship to integrity, it becomes a really interesting dynamic. But always, if a strong idea, I think, will assert itself and catalyze a really interesting reaction. And in my experience, more often than not, the idea will determine the type of project, whether prose, poetry, drama. It just really depends on what it is. But I think my main message here would be the things that you need to be a writer, namely communication skills and an imagination, if we're talking about creative writing, you already inherently have, and you use them every day and every night of your life. The other things, learning the techniques and honing them, these are transferable skills. So you can learn them. The main thing I think that people maybe sometimes need to realize has to come from within is perseverance.
I think that's absolutely true. And I think that's something that we're going to definitely touch on again when we talk about planning and researching and those elements of writing. And last but not least, Louise.
Yes, hello everybody. I'll give a brief visual description. I'm a white woman. I've got short hair and a fringe, dark hair, and I'm wearing a dark top and glasses, and I'm in my workroom, which is, I tidied up especially, but is still a predictable mess with too many piles of books that I should be taking somewhere. I think those are really good answers, and the thing that links them, you know, Nadine saying just getting to your desk, sitting down and putting the hours in, sometimes whether you feel like it or not, and whether it's going well or not, you know, and Kevin summed it up as well, and perseverance. We talk about bum glue. I think I should sell bum glue, because you have to put your bottom on the seat and just apply yourself. And I think also not listening to other people when they tell you that they wrote 5,000 words yesterday, because we all write at different rates. Getting the idea, gosh, some ideas I've walked about with literally for years, not knowing what the form is and what kind of home they'll find. So sometimes just not being too impatient, allowing something to find its place, and having your notebook and putting things down onto your notebook and being kind to yourself. I'm also a really big fan of the little snooze. So, and Robert Louis Stevenson writes about this really well in a chapter on dreams, which you can get online. And sometimes if it's just not coming, I set an alarm for 20 minutes, and the couch behind me, I go and I lie down on the couch. And it's important to remember I'm still working when I lie down on the couch, and I close my eyes and I try to get to that point that's between sleep and awakeness, and to open up, you know, the door inside your head, because sometimes you can be thinking too much. And this can also work with you know, whatever it is that you like to do. If you're doing the housework, if you're running, if you're swimming, just something that sometimes I'll go for a swim and I think I'll think about this problem. And sometimes I go for a swim and I think I'm not going to think about anything. And just to open up that door. So there's many, 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 many ways, but don't panic. Just let it come.
That's fantastic. Fantastic advice, I think, no matter whether you've never written before or you're a really seasoned writer. So the next part of this conversation that I would love to move to is around plotting, planning and research. So you've had your idea, you perhaps understand that it's going to be something that you can't just set down on the page immediately. You actually need to maybe do a little bit of research or plan out. How is it that you three approach that? And I'm going to go with Kevin first, then Louise, then Nadine.
Yeah, thanks, Alice. I just love to sort of build on something that Louise said there. I'm a huge advocate of doing something that's mindless and rhythmical and enjoyable, like cycling or jogging or walking. Find something that you enjoy, and ideas will tend to arise when the mind is in that nice, relaxed state. In terms of the big question here is over, I suppose it's over structure. And I'm a big advocate in of two things especially, is remembering that creative writing, I think, works best when it's emotionally engaging and meaningful. Because the one I usually find a hard sell is to tell aspiring writers, work towards meaning. And they usually resist this. So I say, well, would you rather spend 2 weeks of your life reading a novel that's meaningless or one that has meaning? And they always say one that's got meaning. And I say, would you rather then spend a year or 2 years or more of your life writing a novel, if we're talking about novels, that's meaningful or one that's meaningless? And then I show them that by having a guiding meaning, it's like having a compass that gets you from the beginning point of a long narrative, let's say, to the end point, and it always holds you to it. And actually, it makes the process easy, much easier, not easy. It's a challenge, not a chore, still a challenge. It makes it easier. And also, if you have a piece of work that asserts a kind of truth or a meaning that you really believe in, then you're adding something to the greater store of the world's truth and understanding, regardless of how fictional what you're writing is. And also in terms of structure, you know, I mentioned a haiku earlier. Every single convention or so-called rule of the haiku, of the traditional haiku, has been successfully broken. And I think that what we have to sort of be open to is this idea that, yes, there are conventions, yes, there are rules, but if we have artistic justification for doing so, we can successfully break them. So knowing the structures, knowing the patterns will help you to be able to have the choice of utilizing them or not. And I'm not abdicating the sort of responsibility towards structure there in any way, because actually very often what happens is that a phrase I use is limitation leads to liberation. So for example, the worst creative writing workshop in the world is, here's a pen, here's a piece of paper, now write something. But if you say, oh, this is what a sonnet is, here are the forms and structures and rules and conventions that people have used, and here are examples, now write your own, then it's much, much easier because they're guided through it. And a lot of these shapes and structures are pre-approved, pre-tested, and they became conventional because they work.
Absolutely, that's a brilliant answer. I think that the generative constraint can be a really important part of the writing process. Thank you. So next is Nadine.
Was it Louise? Did I overtake
It
Louise?
was Louise. I've gone mad. Louise, you next.
Thank you. I liked what you said there about the parameters, Kevin, because I'm a big fan of parameters as well. You know, if somebody asks you to write a play and they say, now you have a Busby Berkeley cast of thousands and finance is no problem. And oh my goodness, often the things that are great are when we're trying to overcome the problems and constrictions that parameters offer us. Research, sometimes with your novel, especially a first novel, you've been doing research all your life without knowing it. You know, if you're writing about something that you already are concerned about and you know about, or something that you're angry about, you might actually have done a lot of that research. But if it is something that you don't know about, a historical subject, the thing is to know when to stop your research, because research is just brilliant. You know, a library, a lot of books, peace and quiet. Oh my goodness, who doesn't like that? Research can go on and on for years. So there's a point when you stop researching and you start writing, and that's when you find out what it is that you don't know and what it is that you need to know. So the research process tends to go on and on and on. Planning, you know, before we started, we were saying, gosh, if only there were a recipe that we could give everybody. Because when I wrote my first book, I thought, once I finish writing this, I'll know how to write a book. It'll be simple, you know, I'll have the method. But the truth is that the method changes for every book that you write. And that's part of the pleasure as well, because who wants it to be easy? So I think knowing that everybody else finds it difficult. Some people are spreadsheet writers, you know, they have everything worked out. Other people are driving in the dark with the headlamps off. You can just see a little bit ahead on the road. And I think part of the process is finding out, what kind of writer are you? Are you a writer that you know, like Jean le Carré, who would fling everything down on the page, and apparently his first drafts were awful, but he knew where he was going and he knew what to fill in. Or are you a meticulous writer that you know, goes back and edits and edits and edits as they go along? Because there is nothing, there's no wrong method. There's the method that you make for yourself. For me, I like a bit of planning. Often behind me, I use this thing called a magic whiteboard, and you can put it on your wall, and then you can write all over it, and you see this visual representation. And your room looks like a serial killer's bedroom, you know. So it looks odd and dangerous. But find out what kind of writer you are and try lots of different methods. And if your method deserts you, try the opposite. You know, try mind maps. Try I don't know, talking into a recorder. But just keep on going.
Thank you. I always think that I write creative nonfiction because I'm a bit scared of taking off the training wheels at the library and all those lovely reference books. Nadine.
Yeah, I think so I really agree with Louise as well about, like, for me, I think different projects require different planning and plotting processes from me. And I think you might hear a lot about, like, writers use these terms like planners or pantsers, and I think pantsers refers to flying by the seat of your pants. I think that's what it means. And I think for me, there's definitely at different projects I've done different ones. And so, like, when I wrote the book that's just come out now, The Hidden Story of Estino, that was like my second verse novel, and I felt this huge amount of, like, the second book pressure. So I was like, I wrote the first book very much in a figure it out as I go along style, and then with the second book I started to second guess myself, and I thought, okay, you've got to really plan this. That's how proper authors do it. You know, you've got to do it so that every scene is back to back to back. You've planned how it's going to go. And I took so much from that experience and I loved it. But then also with the book that I'm now writing, I've kind of gone back to trusting myself again and being like, actually, you can find the magic in some of the surprises in not knowing what's exactly ahead. Because I think, you know, one of the things that we touched on in our first answers too was about that creative, almost liminal, almost subconscious space where some of your best ideas and revelations can come from. And I think for me, you know, writing is often a conversation with yourself as well. And so I find that when I have an idea of where I'm going, I've got a rough map, I know where I'm going, but there's still a lot to surprise me. And it's less me trying to tell the story and the story trying to tell itself to me. That's when some of these really exciting revelations come to me, and something I really enjoy. And then just to add as well, one of my favorite quotes about writing that gives me a lot of comfort and that I hope might give comfort to folks today is from Stephen King, from his book on writing. And he talks about how the first draft is just you telling the story to yourself. And I think it's so easy, you know, you get halfway through a first draft and then you think, oh no, I need to go back and edit this and this. And it's like, actually just keep going. You're just telling the story to yourself. You can edit this later. You know, just keep going and let that story unfold, and have that freedom, that liberty. And yeah, I think that for me, I find very reassuring. Yeah.
That's a lovely quote, and it ties really beautifully into our next question. I feel almost, Nadine, that you've started to answer it, and this is a question from one of the audience members. It's that they are very interested in thoughts from the panel about the difficult middle stage of writing when you start wanting to edit it and you start thinking, oh God, is the structure all wrong? Do you have any advice for kind of getting over that hump, essentially? And I'm going to go Louise, Kevin, Nadine.
Yeah, we call it the muddle in the middle, you know, and I'm writing my 11th book now. The middle is the hardest, you know, it really is. And it's how do you keep the momentum going? How do you keep that forward thrust? You might know the ending, you know, the beginning, but what are all the things, the stages that connect it? And there's no, you know, like every answer that we're going to give, there's no magic bullet here. I think it is helpful to know that other people find it difficult as well. There are points when I do go back and edit. I do go back and look at what I've done before, because the answer to what's holding me up might be in the beginning. The only comfort that you get of having written more books is that you know you got through that wall, over or under or through or around it before. And I think just keeping on turning up, even when it's not working, even when it's not going well, and asking, just what I think of it almost like a journey. So there are points when I might take the wrong direction. So I might go left when I should have gone right. Part of the way that I'll find that out is by going on the wrong road, and it can take a lot of time, and it can be really frustrating, really, really frustrating. But when you discover that you've gotten on the wrong road, perhaps you'll begin to find the right road. So I guess, I imagine even Stephen King, and that's such a brilliant book on writing. It's a great one. I imagine that even he gets a little bit stuck sometimes in the middle. And Alan Sillitoe's the Journey of the Long Distance Runner, which is a great book. I always felt he was writing about writing, not about running. And it really is just keep putting one step in front of the other. And there may be a day when you're in word count deficit. That's okay. That's all right. It's not day by day. It's the entire journey. So I don't know if that's helpful or not. It's like, just don't despair. Keep on doing it.
Thank you so much. That's a really powerful point. Just keep turning up. Kevin.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the most important thing is to remember that a bad first draft has a chance of publication. An absolutely exquisite half-written draft has no chance of publication. I often think about how many great manuscripts are lying in drawers in Ochter Machti alone. I mean, and I think it's a crying shame. Don't allow yourself to become one of those statistics. What I like to do is sometimes I'll go into a bookshop or a library and I'll look around at all the wealth and diversity of books that have been published. And I remind myself, all of these were written by human beings. And long may that be the case. Like, I'm not going to discuss AI, but these were all written by human beings. I like to think of myself as a human being. There's nothing special about me. I've written, 5 or 6 books and done all the other things and edited books and plays, and they don't write themselves. So a bit of self-belief or even self-deception is necessary here, where you have to draw on those inner resources and also take heart from the fact that, honestly, hand on heart, the majority of the talented writers that I've met are more likely to be insecure than overconfident. It's much more commonplace to meet even really, really, really successful writers who still have that kernel of insecurity. It's almost reassuring to know that. So try to remind yourself that we're all fallible, but all books, all great works of literature have been created by, regular, living, breathing, coffee-drinking members of the human race, the same as the rest of us are. But that resilience, you've really got to, even if you've got to fake it till you make it, believe in the destination. Honestly, get a poor draft written rather than never reaching the end. Because a poor draft, you can polish, finesse, and resolve and elevate into something eminently publishable. You can't do that if you never complete the draft. And if you never complete the draft, I think it's somewhere deep down in your mind, it could weigh on you and be a counterproductive thing in your life. So you kind of owe it to yourself to get to that end point and get that draft done. Then you can start being concerned about, well, how exactly will I go about polishing this? Where are the missteps, or where are the areas that most require attention? But it's all worth it in the end. And just imagine yourself holding that book in your hands for the first time, and that would be the sort of carrot at the end of the stick.
That's lovely, thank you. Before we get to Nadine, I'm just going to remind everybody that the chat, not the chat, I keep calling it the chat, the question and answer function will be opening very shortly if you have any additional questions. So just to let you know. We're not going to be doing it through raising hands, and we're not going to be doing it in the chat. It will be only through the Q&A function. just to keep everything streamlined so I've got a chance of managing it. Right, Nadine.
Thank you. Yeah, something that really struck me about like both Kevin and Louise's answers is that I think our answers to this are also kind of answers about being human and how we kind of deal with challenge in life generally. And I know certainly for me, in any challenge, it's that, okay, we're just going to take this step by step. Like, I'm human, I'm doing the best I can. Like those sort of mantras are true for life, and they're true for writing. And I think for me, so I write both poetry and I write verse novels. And so with a poem, if I was kind of stuck in the poem and feeling this just isn't working for me, what I'd make sure is that I kind of at least had a semblance of a finished poem, so I knew vaguely what it was. And then with poetry, so very different to what I would do with a verse novel. With poetry, I would usually pop it in like a drawer and come back to it with a clearer head. But then with my verse novels, a completely different approach to this, and it's very much like Louise was saying. It's about the bum glue. It's about showing up each day. And what I actually find, and why, because I'm a morning person, you know, I have my 6 a.m. rise. But I'm like, even if I like did 20 minutes this morning and I wrote 5 words, I'm still 5 words further than I was yesterday, you know. And it's that thing of that negative self-talk that we might have, like, oh, I should be writing, or oh, I'm not doing anything on this, and oh, it's never going to happen. And if actually you're beginning your day, again, caveat, I'm a morning person, perhaps for you it might be ending your day with knowing that I've at least done a little bit of something towards this, can actually be a really empowering feeling. And then, so something that I do when I do get to that, the middle bit, and I don't know if this is good advice or not. I don't know if this is good advice for anybody else, but sometimes if I'm really struggling, I sort of jump forward to writing a scene that I'm really excited about, because it kind of gets me back into like why I was really excited to work on the book in the first place. And then I know, right, okay, you've only like, I've written that scene that's like 5 chapters ahead. Now you're going to get yourself to there. And then even if when I come to it, I end up changing that scene or whatever, it's still got me back into the excitement of writing this book, and the excitement of what I know is brilliant about it. And it's kind of motivated me to get further in that place. And that's something that has really worked for me in the past, because I absolutely have been there. And I can tell you with the most confidence that there's been times when I've been writing a book and I've been like, oh, I'm just not going to get anywhere. It's just not going to go well. And I've been so despairing. And then after continually working on that book, you know, now in hindsight, I'm like, gosh, I love that book. I'm so proud of it for the hard work I did. I think it really has achieved something. So it's believing in yourself. It's putting in the work. It's all of these things. And it's also normal. It's also human.
Absolutely. Thank you all for those answers. As the chair, it's my job to have a really beady eye on the clock. So I'm going to move to some more practical matters, and I'm going to ask our brilliant panelists for some short fire answers. So, or, you know, something resembling a short fire answer. So my next question is about editing. So this is a kind of combined question. We've had some brilliant questions from our audience and also some points to cover around what happens when you've written your first draft. People are asking for some advice on the following things. First is on editing your own first draft. The second is, what is a beta reader? When might you use one? How do you share your work for critique, if you do it at all? And the third one is, there are so many professional services, professional editors who can help you kind of kick your book into shape, people who offer mentoring. Have any of you ever used those services? And kind of more generally, what do you think? Or do you offer those services, and how do you feel they can be helpful? So that's a kind of combined editing question. You can answer any bits of it that you choose, or all of it. And I'm going to go Louise, Nadine, Kevin.
Okay, so in terms of editing, for me, the editing process is, you know, it's demanding, but it's enjoyable. By the time you get to that point, you have something. You started off with nothing, and now you've got your pages. And you behind me on the table there, those are my new pages, and I have to go through them, and I have to look for inconsistencies. I have to look for points where maybe I've overwritten. I think of it almost like a house. You're building a house, and you have all of the scaffolding up, and the scaffolding is necessary as you're writing And then if you can take away the scaffolding, which are the bits where I tell the story too clumsily, the bits where I repeat, the bits where I go, do you remember this? This is important. If I've built my house properly, I'll be able to take out all of that extraneous stuff. Beta readers, I show it to my partner, who's also a writer and very, very lucky. And I show them to my editor, and then it goes to my agent, then it goes to my editor. In the past, I've had great writing workshops that I've used. I think finding people that you really trust who will kindly challenge you. If you're in a writing group and you feel, gosh, every time I go here, I feel depressed, leave that writing group. You know, work with people that you trust. Maybe your relative thinks that you're the best writer in the world. My dad used to just, every year he'd say, why have I not won the Booker Prize? Because I am the best writer in the world. My dad wouldn't be the best first reader for me, really, you know, would he? Because he just loved everything that I did. Yeah, and what was the professional services? Again, choose them choose them wisely. You know, there are people that will want to take your money, as with everything. Scottish Book Trust, tremendous. What a tremendous resource we have there. I myself, I did a master. I was one of the first groups of master students in creative writing. Wow, amazing. Different things suit different people, but just do that little bit of extra research as you would if you were buying a fridge freezer, you know. Look at the reviews. Don't make sure that you're working with people that are upstanding and are right for you.
Fantastic, thank you so much. I love that idea of editing services being like a fridge freezer. That's fantastic. Nadine, you're next.
Yeah. Again, all great points from Louise. And I'm thinking I'll maybe try and pivot and offer something different. So for writing for children, I think one of the biggest things I would do in my editing is actually look at the children's voices. So like often when I'm writing a first draft, my characters will say really adult phrases or process things in a really adult way. So one of the, if you're someone here who's writing for children and you're thinking, how do I approach editing? Actually, more broadly, generally just with characters' voices, that's something I'd look at. And similarly, I'd also be reading through a draft thinking, when you're writing for children, children need to be the heroes of their own stories. So is it them who are driving the plot, or is it still an adult's world and the children are kind of just living within it? And then within poetry, with writing a poem, when it comes to editing it, one of my most surefire techniques is that I read the poem out loud. And if what I've written in the text and what I'm saying out loud is different or jarring, that's when I know, okay, there's a little edit there. And then I think I would also in a poem be looking at how you're carrying your images, your metaphors, if there's things you can tighten, if there's things you can richen, all of these different things. So yeah, but and otherwise would just sort of really say, yeah, everything Louise said was great. And these would be the kind of things I would add from a poetry or a children's writer's perspective too.
So sorry, I'm on mute. Kevin.
Yeah, so in answer to the question about mentoring, I strongly recommend Monique Vor's own made-to-measure mentoring scheme. I do mentoring for them, and the reason I do it for them is because they're such a great organisation. I don't do mentoring for anyone else at the moment, only for them, and I think it's a really great initiative, and I strongly recommend them. I also have to emphasise that if you're going to use a mentoring service or any kind of professional service, try to get word of mouth recommendations. Secondly, oh yes, I'm a lecturer in creative writing at the University of Stirling, so it probably would be remiss for me not to say that a viable way for many people, maybe it's not for everyone, but I think it's worth considering for those to whom it is relevant, is to think about doing a master's or even a PhD in creative writing. In fact, if you want to become a lecturer in creative writing, for example, at a university nowadays, I would say a PhD is pretty much essential. It didn't used to be, but it kind of is now. In terms of editing, I'm a great believer in editing. In fact, it's the part, we all have our different, forms of Achilles heel or stronger elements. But for me, editing is the part I love. I love redrafting. First drafts to me are the challenge, and then polishing, cutting back. I love it. I think I have two things that I'll say very quickly. One is a word, a phrase, or a sentence is always either for you or against you. So weigh up carefully. In fact, I tell my students and people I meet in the wider non-university world, don't write as though you're being paid by the word. Write as though you're paying for the word. And I also think about something Leslie Glaister, a novelist, once said to me. She said that when she's finished her final draft, she takes the draft and she removes every single word that isn't absolutely essential. So she strips the whole thing out and she gets what she calls her slasher version. That's the version she publishes.
I'm really enjoying all these idioms, the muddle in the middle, the bum glue, the slasher version. This is like a great kind of masterclass in the imagery of writing. So we are now intruding into audience question time, and we've got some brilliant questions already, but there's just one more kind of big topic that I wanted us to cover before I move in, and that is the topic of funding and facing barriers in writing. So we all know that writing is a long and often lonely slog, and for many writers, their first few books take place in the context of also having a job. However, there are places where writers at all different stages of their careers can find funding support. I would say Creative Scotland is one of the primary funders of the arts in Scotland. I'm very happy for any of the panelists to share their experiences of applying for Creative Scotland funding if they have them. I would say I'm going to put my email in the chat. Our open fund has a rolling deadline. We award grants to writers at all stages for anything from research and development to travel to time to write, as we might call it, or support for funding for things like Money Outdoors editing, mentorship services. So I am going to put my email in so that anyone who's got any specific funding questions about the Creative Scotland Open Fund can just come straight to me. So I'm going to open this up when we face maybe some writing barriers, whether that's intersectional identity, minority identities, whether that's class, whether that's chronic illness, busyness, whatever it might be. Who might we turn to for support? And also, has anyone in the panel got, and I'm saying this because I know you do, experience of applying for or receiving funding? And if so, who from? So I'm going to go Kevin, Nadine, Louise.
The first thing I want to say about funding is the same. I think I saw a question somewhere, either for this or the thing I'm doing later, about somebody had an anxiety because they'd entered a number of writing competitions and hadn't won. My heartfelt plea here is not to feel disappointed, disillusioned, or disheartened, because in writing competitions, there's only one winner. There's multiple runners-up and loser, well, or second, third placed winner, whatever. Only one person can win, and it's not always indicative of anything. And I say that as somebody who's judged quite a few writing competitions. In terms of funding, it's a long time since I applied for anything because, well, I mean, I think back to the early days when I started writing when I was very young, and I remember in Creative Scotland's predecessor, the Scottish Arts Council, a writer whom I knew encouraged me to apply for a writer's bursary, which I didn't even know what it was. And in those days, it was very, very different because you sent a portfolio of work and letters of reference from 2 established writers, and your work was basically up against work by other professional writers. There was no new writer or aspiring writer or any of these criteria that are so absolutely commonplace nowadays. And I was really lucky. I got a significant amount of money, and I was overwhelmed with gratitude because I grew up in a very working class background, and the money was so helpful. But I knew the money would run out, and it did. But the fact that I won that bursary never ran out and never left my CV, and has always remained with me. Also, somebody who was on that panel, Judy Moyer, who was a senior editor at Canongate Books, sent me a letter about, I don't know, months or maybe a year later saying, Kevin, you don't know me. I was on this panel that awarded you this bursary. I'm a senior editor at Canongate Books. Would you please send us a manuscript? And that's when my first book came about. So there's all these links in the chain that ensured I was kind of in the right place at the right time. So don't let opportunities go by you, but don't put all of your stock in them, because don't conflate esteem or an understanding of your own talent with external validation, because then you'll never be happy, because it'll fluctuate way beyond your control.
Perfect. Thank you very much indeed. I'm conscious of time, but let's go to Nadine and then Louise quickly, and then we'll go to audience questions.
Great. I'm gonna try and be really succinct as well. So for me, the Scottish Book Trust New Writers Award, it was really helpful, both because obviously there was the bursary of £2,000, I think, in my time that came with that, but also you get mentoring sessions included in that. So you're not paying for mentoring yourself. The mentoring sessions come included in that. I think for me as well, again, as a writer who in various intersections experiences marginalisation, the Scottish BIPOC Writers Network are really amazing. They have free workshops, which means that you're getting free access to spaces to invest in your craft with other writers. And then I think, again, for me, I'm not from an academic background, and I wrote all of my books while also working, usually across multiple jobs, hence the 6 to 8 a.m. that I keep coming back to before work. And actually, I'm really proud of the different skills that I bring in, different perspectives, just as much as anybody. Everybody can only bring their own path. Everybody can also only bring their own perspective. And I'm really proud of my books too. Whenever I do feel differences within the world, I'm also conscious that my books are countering those differences, and they're antidotes to the next generation. And yeah.
What a fantastic answer about being the change that you want to see in the world. Louise.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that we're all from working class backgrounds, first in our extended families to go into further education. And I think it's important to say that, because there is a perception that writers will always be rich and come from the backgrounds where they knew publishers and they knew other writers. And I work as 2 days a week as Professor of Creative Writing at the University of Glasgow. I've been doing this for I've been writing for 2 decades now. I've won prizes and so forth. I still cannot make a complete living from my writing, even though it's got a level of commercial success. I still get turned down for things, you know. So I think don't look at other people and think, gosh, they're getting lots and lots of success, you know, because last year I got turned down for two sources of funding. Oh well, you know, that's just take it on the chin. That's how it goes, and you get up and you get on the horse again. I had in 2001, I had a grant from what I think was still the Scottish Arts Council. It was life-changing. It was life-changing. Before that, I'm not trying to big myself up more, Nadine. I used to get up at 5 to work before I went to work, because I reckoned it was better to be tired on the works time than in my creative time. And you just do what you have to do, you know. And I'm 60 now. I've been writing for over 20 years. I have no pension. I have sacrificed my life to my art, and I don't regret a minute of it. You know, it's just, but for everybody, yeah, we just need to keep coming back to keep on going. You know, it's hard. It's very hard. It's money is a problem, and we have those discussions. You know, how do you keep on going? And that's when you need your friends and your support network as well. And if you see me in the street, give me £1 for a cup of coffee. No, I don't mean it.
I think that's
yeah.
a very good point, that idea that once you have a novel published or poetry collection published, that you're somehow sorted.
There's not a point where you make it. For most of us, you know, we're not Martin Amis, we're not Will Self. Very few people end up with the big townhouse and the royalties, you know, coming in waves. Most of us are keeping on going and having lentils at least once a week, you know.
Exactly. It's a lentil, it's a lentil heavy life.
Lentils are good for you. Yeah.
the life of a writer. So we have 11 open questions currently. What I am going to do is I'm going to try and start with the ones that have the kind of broadest applicability, just so for everyone in the audience can benefit. There is a brilliant question about here about how to get better at creating a compelling plot. And there is also a really great question about I used to write and I've stopped, and I find it really difficult to find my imaginative voice again. And I feel like those questions are really linked. So any advice for people looking for creating that compelling plot or getting their groove back? I'm gonna go Kevin, Nadine, Louise.
I'll be really quick then. In terms of the compelling plot, pretend to yourself that you're only allowed to write one book. And what is that essential thing within you that needs to be expressed? Say it the best way you can. The second element was, what was it again? The second
how to get the groove back if you've
lost
it.
If you've lost your groove, make time for reading. The single best way to become a writer is to be a reader, and read books you really enjoy. Don't be intimidated by them. Be inspired and think, well, somebody wrote that, and allow that to inspire you and think about the kind of book you want to do, and gravitate towards reading that kind of book. And remember that it's an enjoyable thing ultimately, although it's difficult. It's rewarding partly because it's difficult, but the flip side to that is it is rewarding.
Absolutely. Thank you. Nadine.
Yeah, so I would say, and very much grounded in the context of me being someone who writes children's mystery novels, I think, you know what, if you are enjoying it, if you are feeling like you're flying and having fun on the page, the reader is gonna get that, and that's gonna influence your plot. And when you come into edits, you can also look at plot and pacing as well. You can look at where you're placing the chapters to really add those page turners. And similarly, if you're feeling stuck, not if you're feeling stuck, if you're struggling to know how to start, tap into that joy, tap into that thing that made you love writing in the first place, whatever that is for you. For me, it's that joy and that fun, and enjoying it and having fun with it and thinking, what would be fun to write next? Where would be cool to go next? I'm just going to let my imagination wander and give this writing time as a gift to myself. But that's very much within my own context, but that's what works for me.
I love that idea about our writing time as a gift rather than a chore. Louise.
We tell stories every day. Whenever we talk about our lives, we're telling stories. So don't get caught up in, don't make plot a really, really difficult thing. Plot is only part of the story. Character is really important, atmosphere, sense of place. Something that really helps me is to take apart books that I really love and think often about how simple the actual plot is. If you take apart something like Jane Eyre, it's a really, really simple story. So perhaps your story can be simple too, but just brilliantly told. Getting the joy back. Just, don't be too hard on yourself. I bought myself this a few months ago, and it is half an hour. So when the sands run out, then I can get up and I can go and do a stretch, go and have a coffee or whatever. Just sit for half an hour and let the sands go. I got it from libraries and archives, but other hourglass specialists are available.
Libraries and archives in Edinburgh are great, though. They make the most beautiful stationery. Okay, we have 4 minutes, and I have to stop in 2 minutes. So we're going to do a really quick round. We're going to answer Sana's amazing question, which is, what is the one thing you would definitely spend money on while writing a book if funds were limited? I'm going to go Nadine, Kevin, Louise.
The only thing I can think is the actual tools to write. I would actually need a working laptop or a pen and paper, something that I could actually write with. I think so. Yeah, a thick notebook, a pen. That's what I would use, and I would write with them.
That is brilliant. Thank you, Kevin.
a one-way ticket to a place you'd find inspiring.
Amazing, a very desert island discs kind of vibe. And finally, Louise.
I can't better Nadine's answer. The great thing about writing is it doesn't need lots of equipment. It just needs an imagination and a love of storytelling. So really good luck to everybody.
Fantastic. And I'm going to counter it. I'm going to come in last, and I'm going to say a chair with decent back support. Because you can't write if you put your back out, and it's a very kind of mid-30s thing to say, isn't it? Discovering the fallibility of my own spine. So thank you so much to our three amazing panelists, and thank you for submitting your brilliant questions in advance, and for all the questions that we didn't get to. I'm so sorry. I'm gonna bring Kirstine back into the room to round us all up. But 300 almost of you, it's made us feel like we're celebrities. It's brilliant. Thank you so much, and good luck to you all in your writing.
Thank you, Alice. And thank you so much, Kevin, Nadine and Louise, for what is an utterly invaluable conversation. And thank you to the audience for all your questions and comments. And if you are watching the recording, please do let us know your thoughts below the video as well. Thank you again to Creative Scotland, Hawthornden Foundation, Society of Authors, and the team at Moniac Moore for making it all happen. The recordings will be available through Moniac Moore's website and YouTube channel, and all links and books discussed here will be included with that recording. So we'll notify everyone in the live audience once that's available. They're being made available as these events are the start of an ongoing conversation and resource that we hope. And if you didn't get your specific question answered today, please know that actually all the questions are being read and considered. Moniac Moore will be using them to feed into our own programme development. So yeah, there will be absolutely future opportunities, and that goes for those watching the recording too. So please do comment below the video and let us know your thoughts. For the same reason, we will send out a short feedback form that would be super grateful if you could fill out, and there'll be a link to that form available in the info below the recording. And just to let you know before I sign off, for those watching live, if you'd like a further insight into the Scottish literary world, Louise is in conversation with Jenny Niven in a hybrid event with the Royal Society of Edinburgh on the 20th of May. Also, I should mention as well, because I know that we're trying to cram quite a lot in there. So there will be a transcript with the recording if you want to rewatch anything and clarify any of the chat. There will be that opportunity. So all that leaves me to say is, again, a huge thank you to our panelists and chair. So thank you, Alice, Kevin, Nadine and Louise, and to all of you for joining us. Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.